Hello and welcome back to Bookish. Today I'm here with a tag because it's Tag Tuesday. This is the Doughnut tag created by Josh at Literary Gladiators. He was nice enough to tag me in his original video. I will certainly leave a link down below. And I was also tagged by Steve Donoghue, who from looking at me must know that I enjoy donuts, which I certainly do. Love this tag, love donuts. Love talking about donuts and books, so here we go. So prompt number one is classic, a classic book you feel everyone needs to read. My choice for that would be Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is a novel about the African American experience in the United States of America. It is somewhat metaphorical. It is incredibly powerful, and it's one of those books I think that people, particularly in the United States maybe, but I think everywhere else, need to read to get some insight into what it felt like to be a young African American man growing up in the early part of the 20th century. Without that perspective, I don't think we can understand the race relation problems we still have in the United States of America today. I don't think we can move forward without that knowledge of our past. And while this isn't a history book at all, I do think it does what fiction can do, and that is very powerfully create the image and the emotional response from which we can move forward, from which we can understand better. Prompt number two, Vanilla Frosting, a simple but engaging work. So I'm going to go with Enduring Love by Ian McEwan. McEwan is most famous for, I think, winning the Man Booker Prize for Amsterdam. His book Atonement, which gets a lot of mixed responses, I think, was made into a movie, which also I think got fairly mixed responses. I've read, for a while I read a good bit of Ian McEwan's work, and this to me is his best book. Prompt number three is Chocolate Frosted, your second favorite work by your favorite writer. This is indeed one of my favorite writers, Honoré de Balzac, and my second favorite Balzac novel is The Black Sheep. Ask me tomorrow, and my second, this might be my favorite. I don't have a Balzac novel that I've read that isn't one of my favorite Balzac novels, so I'm going to go with The Black Sheep, which basically tells the story of two very different brothers and how they help or hurt their family. Prompt number four is a lesser known or studied work from a known writer you feel should be studied more frequently. I'm going to go with Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Certainly Marquez is well known. He's much more famous for 100 Years of Solitude, for Love in the Time of Cholera, and some of his other works. But I actually found this is my my second favorite Gabriel Garcia Marquez book. I almost chose it for the other category. I just think this is an incredibly well told, vividly, almost painfully vividly told story in some cases. I just really like it, so I think more people should read this book by Marquez. Number five, prompt five, a writer that immediately immersed you. I chose Pat Barker and her series of novels about set in World War I among the poets and writers of World War I that deals with the psychological trauma the war caused for them. This was probably really immersive to me for several reasons. Number one, I think Barker is a great writer, and I think she does a great job in these books. Number two, World War I is kind of my jam history-wise. And number three, I love reading about writers. So it kind of met all three of those criteria for me. So I just picked up Regeneration, which is the first in her series about World War I, and these were really quickly immersive to me. And I think people should definitely read those books, by the way. Prompt six, Jelly Doughnut, a work that contained more than you expected. So I went with nonfiction here, and I picked Paul Revere's Ride by David Hackett Fisher. I expected this just to be about, well, as the name says, Paul Revere's Ride, but really it was much more about pre-revolutionary Boston and Massachusetts and the networks of people who put together and helped begin the American Revolution, with Paul Revere more or less at the center of the story. So I really thought this had more in it than I expected. By the way, I really don't care for a jelly donut very much. Prompt 7 is Boston Cream Pie, a scholarly work you would recommend to a casual reader. Now, I watched Steve's video, which I think I mentioned I'll leave a link to down below, And he essentially said he wouldn't recommend my scholarly work to a casual reader because scholarly works are frequently, for a scholarly audience, and I think that's fair. I do think there are some exceptions, and so this year, Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse is doing a whole course called "You Carry Your Coffin," which is about death and its representations in literature and in movies, and he chose this book, "The Republic of Suffering: Death and the American Civil War" by Drew Gilpin Faust. And I really thought this was a great work of both scholarship and a book which would be accessible to casual readers. Prompt number 8 is Cruller, a work that makes you think of France. 3 guesses of what author I'm about to mention. You got it, Honoré de Balzac, and the book I chose to represent a book of his that reminds me of France is The Wrong Side of Paris, because Paris is right there in the name. This is also the first Balzac novel I read, and I believe I read it shortly after returning from a trip with my wife to Paris. So there you go. It definitely reminds me of France. Maybe not Balzac's greatest book, but it definitely reminds me of France. Let's see, prompt number 9. Powdered Sugar, a work that left you with evident emotion. So like, powdered sugar donut get all over you. And you can't hide that you've been eating a powdered sugar donut very well. So I chose this book, which is called The Family of Pascual Duarte by Camilo Jose Cela, or Cella, I'm not sure how to say his last name. This book focuses on a farmer named Pascual Duarte, and he's kind of a Job-like figure in which all kinds of tragedies beset him, and he has to kind of deal with all of them. But it did leave me with some evident emotions and sadness, and I think it's a book that I found really emotionally powerful. Let's see, Cider, the perfect reading material to read in front of the fire in autumn. Hello, that would be Honoré de Balzac, and so this is the next Balzac novel I plan to read, Cousin Pons. I read Cousin Bet this year. Cousin Pons is kind of the companion piece to that, and I usually save a Balzac novel to read once the weather turns cold. I know that Steve scoffs at mood reading or seasonal reading, but there's something about reading 19th century French literature in the fall that just goes together for me. And prompt 11, a donut hole, a collection of short accessible works, or sections that you enjoyed. So this was a little bit confusing for me. I thought about picking a book of short stories, but then I thought, you know what, something I really enjoyed, which is divided into section, is this book called The Trip to Echo Springs on Writers and Drinking by Olivia Lang. I really like this book, and essentially what she does is she kind of explores the places that writers lived, their biography, their relationship with alcohol, the impact that alcohol had on their lives in writing, and it is divided into sections by author. And I think you could read any one of the sections as a standalone. It's one of those books you could read a section and then, maybe go read works by that author and then move on to the next section, next author. I really enjoyed that book. Let's see, prompt number 12, Raspberry Frosted, Homer's favorite donut, by the way, with sprinkles. A book you would recommend to Homer Simpson, so I'm just going to go the easy route and say Parenting for Dummies. Homer needs some help in the parenting, on the parenting front. Prompt number 13, what is your favorite kind of donut? Well, this depends on if we're just going to go with any kind of pastry sold at a donut shop. So my absolute kind of pastry sold at a donut shop is an apple fritter. I love apple fritters. They're cinnamony, they're apple-y, they're all like bumpy, and they have lots of surface area and crusty, crunchy bits, and that's my absolute favorite. But if we're just talking we're just talking about donut, like the round thing with the hole in the middle, then it would be an old-fashioned that's been dipped in maple icing. I like maple icing on my donuts. An old-fashioned has had the donut has been split on one side so that when it's fried it makes lots of crunchy surface area, and you're probably picking up on that crunchy surface area is important to me in my life and food, and that's true. Then prompt number 14, take time to make the donuts from the old Dunkin' Donuts commercials, and that is to tag some people. So I want to try to tag some people who I don't think I've tagged recently or very often. So I want to start off with Elizabeth from The Bookish North. Alex from What Page Are You On? Paul from PK's Books, Justin, aka Ghost Reader, and then a new channel that I found, which I have found entertaining, is Pints and Paperbacks. And then finally, I wanted to tag Madeline from Made with Books. So there you go. That's my take on the donut tag. I look forward to your comments about donuts and your favorite donuts in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.